The modular is often associated with walls of equipment and experimental sounds, while in fact it's a great tool to create interesting and playable instruments. Instead of always going bigger, I thought I'd bring out my compact modular setup and share a type of exploration I've been enjoying a lot lately. Just to be clear, this is not a starter system or a simple setup. I put this together to show you don't need a lot of modules to make a complete and playable instrument. Today I expand on that proof. In my previous video I already showed a lot of ways you can connect a keyboard to a modular voice with interesting movement and depth. But this setup can add a complete second sequenced voice as well, which creates a playground for little studio jams and improvisations. It's a lot of fun to play over a static looping sequence, but you can also create interesting interactions between the two voices. Playing around and exploring a setup like this is a great exercise in storytelling. Just focus on two elements and the balance and progression of those elements. It can be more than enough to express emotion, set a mood and create little stories. A while ago I made a video about finding inspiration, using two simple sentences as the start for two parts of a little jam or track, and this setup is perfect for that. As always though, I'm not trying to sell you on this specific setup or any modules in it. You can do the same with a completely different setup, even semi-modular voices or other gear, as long as there are two playable voices. I'll share a couple of ideas for creative voices, but also ways to create interaction between the played and sequenced voice. If you like to support my work or you want to get access to PDF sheets with hundreds of patch ideas I've used in my videos, have a look at my Patreon. You can also support my channel through affiliate links in the video description. But now, let's dive right in. To get going, you need two simple voices. These are kept very simple. Both consist of a single oscillator sent through a low-pass filter. The outputs are sent to a stereo effects module and the outputs of the effects are sent to an outboard mixer, only subtly panned left and right in the stereo field. One voice is controlled with a sequencer gating an envelope and the other with a keyboard gating an envelope. The envelopes are each sent through a mixer that can invert signals before modulating the filter, so it's easy to add more complex filter modulation later on. This already creates two functional voices. Just a quick note, no VCAs are used in this setup to keep things simple, but you can add a VCA with envelope modulation after each filter if you like cleaner, controlled sounds. But in my jams I often embrace the dark and drone-ish character. The second step is to add modulation depth and interest to the voices. The mod wheel is a great place to start. In this setup, a copy of the mod wheel CV out is sent to both CV mixers. This makes it easy to dial in the exact amount of effect you want the wheel to have on each filter. Because mixers with inverters are used, it's also easy to have the mod wheel open one filter and close the other at the same time, which is an easy way to crossfade between the two voices. Another fun and simple addition is an LFO, again sent to both inverting CV mixers for a lot of flexibility. You can have the LFO control the presence of both voices in the same way. Or of course, just like the mod wheel, in an inverted way. Once you have two solid core voices, it's a good idea to keep those for a while and see what you can do with them. But a great trick is to add 1 or 2 flying modulation sources to the setup, like an additional LFO and/or envelope. These can be used to add unique interest to specific patches, for example to modulate the wave shape of the oscillators. You can play with the 2 flying modulation sources to add movement to the core setup. For example, use the LFO to modulate the shape of the sequenced envelope, and use the third envelope to open a VCA and control the amount of frequency modulation from the sequenced to the played voice. The mod wheel can be used as a macro control to influence the character of both voices at the same time, especially with a couple of VCAs. For example, opening the mod wheel can add envelope modulation to the shape of the played voice, as well as audio rate frequency modulation from the LFO to the sequenced voice. In this setup, the mod wheel is also used to control the frequency of the LFO modulating both filters. The final step is to add interaction between the voices and just start playing. And of course, I have to start with the obvious. Even though I'll show a few patch ideas for melodic interaction in a bit, sequencer modules are just like other controllers. It's often overlooked you can play these by hand. It's worth spending some time with them and see what's possible. Here the sequencer's length is set to 1 note, allowing for simple manual control over both voices. Just tweaking a single note in a looping sequence is very powerful as well. A specific feature of Bloom, the sequencer I'm using here, is that it can generate mutations as it goes along. This is a nice feature if you like to jam with a bit of a surprise element. Also, instead of an LFO modulating the filter, a fluctuating voltage is used to give the sequence more randomized presence. there are interesting ways to have the melodies of both voices interact. Here's the core dual voice used before, with the mod wheel opening both filters and speeding up the LFO modulating the filters. Most sequencers have a straightforward clock input that just advances the sequencer when it receives a trigger or gate. That means you can send a copy of the gate output from the keyboard to the clock input of the sequencer. This advances the sequence one step every time a key is pressed. Here's the same patch with shorter plucky envelopes. Another nice option is to use the 1 volt per octave output of the keyboard to manipulate the pitch of the sequence. Some sequencers have an option to transpose within scale, which is important for jamming. The sequencer used here has the option to modulate the root note of a sequence while staying in scale. This is a lot of fun for simple musical ideas and sketches. Finally, another interesting way to control both voices is by connecting the mod wheel to the transpose input of the sequencer. This way you can control the sequence with the wheel independent of the played notes. Remember, you can always patch an attenuator between the 1 volt per octave or wheel output and transpose input if you want to scale the range to taste. I hope this gives you some inspiration to use your modular as a playable instrument. If you'd like to learn more, have a look here, and as always, smash that like, subscribe and bell button if you want to see more modular content from me. But that's it for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.